I want to welcome everyone to today's workshop, Getting Started in Brightspace. This is going to be just kind of the basics, a high-level overview of everything that we will be dealing with later on in the platform, just some of the navigation type stuff. And I'm going to kind of go into a lot more as we continue through the workshop today. So what I want to get started with here, the logistics for the workshop. All of our workshops are an hour long, and we've got this series that we've been running of 6 different workshops. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. We have people on mute until the end. We'll save some time at the end for questions. And this recording is going to be sent out to you in a follow-up email roughly within 24 hours after this workshop ends. So if at any point during the workshop today, you feel like it's going too fast, or you're thinking hey, can you repeat that? Don't worry, you're going to get a recording of this so you can watch it at your own pace and rewatch sections if you like. So as I mentioned, today's workshop, Getting Started in Brightspace, is part of a series of workshops that we've been running since earlier this year, which starts with the Getting Started in Brightspace, the high-level overview, as I mentioned, that we'll get into today. Our second workshop in the series is the ABCs of Content, where we take a closer look at some of the building blocks that you'll be using when you're creating your course in Brightspace. Next, we have Engaging Learners, which is a workshop dedicated to the different tools and features in Brightspace that help us connect with our students, help our students connect with each other, help our students connect with the course content. Things like announcements, emails from Brightspace, discussion boards. The next one we have is Assessing Learning, which is a workshop dedicated to tools that are measuring your students' learning, primarily creating assignments and also taking a look at the quick eval tool. And I say primarily assignments because discussion boards is discussed in Engaging Learners. And you can see right below Assessing Learning, it says quizzes. So we have an entire workshop just dedicated to quizzes and all the settings and some of the different logistics behind the scenes when you're building a quiz. Last but not least, we have an hour-long workshop on the gradebook. The gradebook is obviously a little bit more complicated than we're used to because it's got a bunch of different options for how you can view it, how you can enter grades, so on and so forth. So we just have an entire workshop dedicated to that. Now, when you receive your recording of today's workshop, you will also get in that email a heads up of additional resources that you can use for further training. So D2L, the parent company of Brightspace, has the Brightspace community online, which is just a website with all kinds of articles, links to some of their videos that they've created, just a ton of information. You can pretty much find out almost anything you want on their D2L Brightspace community website. Next, here at CUNY, we have the Brightspace resource course. So it is a course inside Brightspace for you to take as an instructor or whatever role you have here at CUNY, but it gives you kind of the feeling of being a student in a Brightspace course, and at the same time gives you an opportunity to get hands-on with some of the different tools that you'll be using as an instructor. Next, there are videos on YouTube. So there are not only videos by Brightspace D2L, the company that makes Brightspace, they have their own YouTube channel, but also we at CUNY are building our own YouTube channel for videos as well. And one of the things you'll find there is recordings from these workshops in the past. And last but not least, CUNY IT Help, or some people know it as ServiceNow, SNOW, sometimes it's called that. That is just a platform here at CUNY for knowledge-based articles. So today we're going to look at the familiarity of the different home pages inside Brightspace, college home pages versus course home pages. We're going to look at creating a practice site, how to copy and import parts of a course or an entire course, some of the navigation and basic features that you'll be using, and we'll take a little look at the student experience in Brightspace as well. So when you go into Brightspace, you're going to see this. You're first going to go to the URL brightspace.cuny.edu. And you will then log in with your first name, last name, the last two digits of your EMPL ID at login.cuny.edu. You're going to see this CUNY login page that's very similar to what you see if you go to CUNY Zoom, CUNY Dropbox, any of those extra tools that you've been using here at CUNY as an instructor. You'll be signing in through that CUNY login. So that's what you'll see. Now, before we get into Brightspace, I wanted to just take a moment to show you as an example, depending on what your role here at CUNY is, you may come in on a landing page directly associated with whatever school you are associated with. So if you're only associated with one school in the CUNY system, then you would very likely just come straight in on that landing page. So you can see some examples here on the screen of what it looks like, the BMCC landing page. And you can see the branding and the colors and some of the different items that are on the nav bar for the college landing page. Below that, as a different example, City College of New York shows you a little bit of a different kind of view. Same thing with the branding and the colors, and we can kind of see that it kind of changes up the order of things that are on the nav bar. Then we have, as another example, Hunter College. If you're associated with Hunter College, then you would come in on their landing page and it would look like this. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what you'll be dealing with. All right, so I am now going to take you into Brightspace. So my role here at CUNY, it's intended that I could help out anyone at any school, not about all the specifics, but just like a high level of help. And because of that, it's intended that I can access any of the college landing pages. So when I come into Brightspace, I have the CUNY general landing page for Brightspace, as we're seeing here. And then I have what's called a widget, which is just kind of like this little square mini screen or whatever here on the screen. It is a tool that enables you to connect to the other schools. So as I mentioned before, if you are associated with more than one school, perhaps you are an instructor of record at more than one school in the CUNY system, perhaps you are an instructor at one school and you're a student at another. You would most likely come in, as you see here, on the CUNY branding page, landing page for Brightspace, and then you could come down to CUNY College and say, oh, I want to go to the Bronx landing page, and you would see it like this. So how it looks when you go in depends on your associations with schools, your role here at CUNY. Now, before I get too much into showing you some of the navigation and creating a practice site and all that good stuff, I do want to point out something that's really important that I want to make sure everyone is aware of and has access to. And that is the Brightspace LMS transition site. So for me, when I come in here under Brightspace Help, I can see CUNY LMS transition. And if my colleague Anastasia would please drop in the chat the link to the LMS transition page, just so everyone has easy access to it. We can see here when you come in and you scroll down just a tiny bit, we'll come to this little page here that says Jump To. And there's three things I want to show you before I dive into showing you about Brightspace. Three very important things. Number one, if you come down here to Training and Resources, well, actually, let me go to Workshops first. Come down here to Workshops. And when you click on the Workshops button, that takes you to another page inside this LMS transition site. And we can see here, right here is the link to the LMS Transition YouTube channel. So you can just click on it. It takes you straight here, and all those workshops that I mentioned, ABCs of content, getting started in Brightspace, et cetera, we have recordings from previous times that those workshops have been given, posted here. And a few additional topics as well are here too. So that's one thing that it should be noticed here is when you come in here to the, go back here a second. So you come in on the LMS transition page, you scroll down just a tiny bit. If you're watching the recording this, scroll down just a bit on the LMS transition page, go to Workshops, and then you can see the link to the LMS Transition YouTube channel. Beyond that, I also want to point out that scrolling below that will show you the names once again of all the different workshops we offer. including Ask Me Anything sessions that pop up sporadically as well. And there's a little explanation of what's covered in these different workshops, so you can kind of figure out which one do you need to go to. And then scrolling down farther than that, you can see the days, times, and a link to register for that workshop. So right here, October 8th, 11 a.m., getting started in Brightspace. And then I have another one today at 5 o'clock to try to help out adjuncts who have a hard time coming to the day ones. You'll also see we have Ask Me Anything here as well. So that's number one that I want to point out. And then coming back here to the LMS transition page, back to that jump to box, if you click on training and resources, scroll down just a tad, you can see that every school has a campus teams contacts page that you can go to. So although obviously I'm here to help you out and help you kind of get the hang of Brightspace, everyone does have local resources at your school that can help you as well. So you would just find your transition group, come down here, click on the little plus, and then that's going to show you names of people that have self-identified as resources for people that are trying to learn Brightspace, as well as many of these, but not all of them, have a team email and or a website that you can go to for additional information. So just bear that in mind, that the way you can find out who the help people are at your school is to come here to the LMS transition page, jump down to training and resources, and then you'll see the campus teams contacts. And again, this is being recorded, so you'll see this later. Now, the last thing I want to point out, because I said three things, is the transition document hub, which is just below all these campus teams contacts. And if you come down here in the transition document hub, you will see Blackboard to Brightspace manual course migration guide. And if you click on that, it's going to open up this document here that has very clear step-by-step instructions for how you can migrate a course yourself. And if you're asking, wait, why do I need to do that? So bear in mind that CUNY is taking care of migrating 4 years of courses for you from Blackboard to Brightspace on your behalf. And the order that they're doing it in has been so far like looking at what semester is coming up next. So obviously we're already in fall. So Blackboard fall 2023 courses have long ago been moved over here, and we're already in Brightspace, or many teachers are actually working in Brightspace. So now the team that is migrating courses from Blackboard to Brightspace for you is looking at the spring 2024 courses that you taught in Blackboard, migrating those over into Brightspace to help everyone get ready to teach spring 2025 in Brightspace. So the reason I'm pointing out this document here, the Blackboard to Brightspace manual course migration guide, is in case you are concerned that a course that you have is existing in Blackboard right now is perhaps outside of that 4 years and might not get migrated, or if you're feeling like they're just not migrating it fast enough for you, like maybe you already want to start like editing your spring course, you want to get on it and you don't see it already over in Brightspace. So you can do that yourself. So these are the steps. It just takes you through how you export it into a zip file inside Blackboard. And then it continues on and shows you, you just move over here into Brightspace and you basically import in that zip file and it unzips it and it puts your course inside Brightspace for you. And the best part of all is if you're looking at this and feeling a little bit hesitant and feeling like, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that myself, hey, reach out to a campus teams contact at your school and say, is somebody available to walk me through doing this one time myself just to make sure I don't miss any steps? You've got help at your school. You've got lots of help. We're here to try to support you in this process. So all that said, let me now get back to right here. Here we are inside Brightspace. So let me start going through the stuff I wanted to cover today, just a high-level overview of the navigation inside Brightspace, along with how to do a course copy. And bear in mind, when I say migrate, that's a term we usually use for from one platform to another. So you hear me say migrate when I'm talking about from Blackboard to Brightspace. However, when we talk about course copy, we're talking about being inside the same platform. So when I refer to course copy, I'm referring to copying something that's inside Brightspace right now into something else that's inside Brightspace right now, just to kind of get us on the same page there. So when you come inside Brightspace, no matter where you land, one thing that is going to be the same regardless of what your role is, which school you're coming in on, is what's called a mini-navbar at the top, these little icons. So let's do a quick walkthrough so you understand what they are, and then we're going to dive into other things. This thing here at the top sort of looks like a Rubik's Cube or a waffle, perhaps, is the course picker tool. And you'll see it says select a course when I move my cursor over it. So once I click on that, it's going to drop down and it's going to show you your courses. It could show you courses that have already been migrated over from Blackboard into Brightspace, or once you start building things in Brightspace, it will be showing you your courses inside Brightspace, whether it's a practice site that you might create yourself, or a shell, which is what the school creates for you when students sign up for your class. So a practice site, or sometimes people call it a sandbox, is just for kind of like editing and playing around with your stuff, and it doesn't have any students in it. So those two words, practice site, sandbox, no students. Shell is the term that's usually used for what is created by the school behind the scenes as your students register online to take your course. So that has your students in it. So practice sites and shells are all going to be listed here for you. I'm seeing a ton of things here because, again, for my role here, it's intended I could help pretty much anyone. So that's why I'm seeing so much stuff. So you would just see yours, but I do want to point out one little nice feature here. If you come over to the right side, this little thumbtack, if you click on it and you see it then gets dark, it's filled in, that's going to pin it for you to kind of keep it to the top. And I'll show you the widget that you're going to see it in the top, or just in this course picker, it moves up into the blue area. And like I could do this, I could pick a lower one down here, for example. And then once I refresh it and come back to the course picker, we'll see that both of those that I just clicked the thumbtack on are now in the favorite section, or the pinned section, if you will. It's very much like how in Blackboard you had the little star you could click on and to put it in your favorites. So it just makes it quicker to find. So your course picker is here. And as you can see at the top, you can also do a search as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Over here, this thing that looks like an envelope and says message alerts, when you click on it, we've got the option to go to email. So there is an email option inside Brightspace. We talk about this more in depth when we do the workshop on engaging learners. So I'm not going to go into great detail on it today. I will just show you, if I click on this email button, this is going to open up the opportunity for me to send an email from somebody, or from myself, to somebody. And I will tell you that the Brightspace emails, when your recipient gets it on their side, it's going to go to whatever email that person has associated in CUNY First. So CUNY First is the hub for CUNY faculty, CUNY staff, CUNY students. You go there and set up what your email is that you want to have notifications. So that's where Brightspace pulls the emails from for communicating with people. So it's going to look like it came from you, from whatever email you have that's associated in CUNY First, and it will go to whatever email of a person they have associated with CUNY First. So it's not going to look like specifically it came from Brightspace, is what I'm trying to say. And to that point, there's no inbox inside Brightspace for mail. Your inbox for any Brightspace email is your regular CUNY email. So that's why we see a sent box here. So we can always see what we sent. It will keep track of that. But in terms of like an inbox, if I want to see an email that I sent and then somebody responded back to me, their response to my Brightspace email comes to my regular CUNY email. So there's not any notification inside here about you just got an email. So we'll get into email more, like I say, in engaging learners, but I just want to point that out as part of the mini nav bar here. Continuing on, this right here, subscription alerts, is going to notify you with this little orange dot like we see over here with update alerts. It will notify you if you have subscribed to something and someone has posted or commented. For example, you can choose when you create discussion boards to subscribe to them, which means you will get an email notification if somebody posts on that discussion board. Some instructors like to set up a discussion board called Ask the Instructor, where students feel like they can go there to ask questions related to course content or assignments or whatever. And you can register with that discussion board to get a notification. And then when you come into Brightspace, you'll see like a little orange dot letting you know that there's been some activity on that discussion board. Then coming over here to update alerts. This could be a mix of updates inside your course. It can be a mix of updates inside whatever school you're associated with. It can be updates that are like a CUNY-wide announcement, like scheduled maintenance or those type of things. So those are the kind of notifications you'll see here. Continuing on to our mini nav bar, if you move over here to your name, and if you haven't put a picture in, it most likely just shows your initials here instead of a picture. If I click on that, we have the drop down of several choices. View as learner, profile, notifications, account settings, language, logout. So first, let me take a quick peek at, well, let me come back to view as learner when I'm inside a course. One thing I want to tell you though, right out of the gate, this view as learner feature is different from student view in Blackboard. Student view, when you switch over to that, it also lets you pretend to be a student in your own course. So you can do your own discussion boards and do your own assignments and do your own quizzes. And that is not how this view as learner looks. View as learner in Brightspace is literally just going to show you what do students see. So like if you're hiding some of your modules because maybe you don't want module 2 to appear until after module 1 ends, then when you click to view as learner, you won't see your module 2 that you've built because Brightspace is showing you this is what your students see right now. So you can't really do the actions of being a student, you're just getting a look at it, but I'll show you that later. So let's look at profile for a moment. If we come here into profile, this is where you can choose to add a picture. It's just showing me change picture because I already have one, but it would say like upload picture or add picture here before you put one in. You can put any kind of personal info that you might want to share with people in here. Just gonna save and close that. Coming back up here, we have notifications. When you click on that, it first gives you a notice that there is the Pulse app, which is the Brightspace on-the-go version for mobile phones and devices and stuff like that, tablets and whatnot. So you can certainly get that from the Google Store, the App Store. And then here where it says contact methods, this is showing me, the email that is in CUNY first associated with me. Where it says change your email settings, you can't change your email here in Brightspace per se. If you wanted to go to a different email, you need to set that up in CUNY first, just to clarify, and it pulls from CUNY first about your email. And then below, as we continue on, a summary of activities. How often do you want to let Brightspace know you what's going on in your course? I just check never, so I'm not getting pelted with stuff, but whatever makes sense for you. And then notifications by email. Your students will automatically have these two checked off. These notifications are only notifications for the user that's sitting at the keyboard right now. These are just for me. So when you're inside notifications, these are notifications just for you. So you can't set up what kind of notifications your students will or won't receive. They have the power to do that on their own side. But my understanding is at this point, the default setting is that they will receive email notifications of any announcements you make in the course. So if a student wants to not get those notifications, they would have to come in here and uncheck those. And you can kind of just go through these yourself and look through and see what makes sense to you if you do want to sign up for more notifications. So I'm just going to X out of that. Come back in here to account settings. And when I come into account settings, this is where you can choose to put pronouns if you like. Font settings. Bear in mind, this is only going to change it for you, the user. This will not change what your students see. So if you, for example, would rather have the font larger, you can see by selecting huge, it made my font bigger. Whatever makes sense for you and works for you. And you can kind of just go through and continue to look through these. I don't want to get too in the weeds on this today, but there's a bunch of different things you can look through and select if you choose, if it makes sense for you. So I am just going to get out of that. And then let's see, I guess that is pretty much everything then. We've got the notifications, account settings. Okay, so that's the mini nav bar up here. Now, let's go back to our landing page here. Let's look at some of the widgets you can see on the landing page, and I will also go inside one of the schools and show you what it looks like as well when I'm inside a school. You may have the CUNY Colleges widget, as I mentioned earlier, if you have associations with more than one school here in the CUNY system. Otherwise, you most likely will just come in straight on that school's landing page. You can have announcements over here that are just CUNY-wide announcements because I'm on a generic CUNY landing page. And then remember how I mentioned up above, pinning courses? You can have this My Courses widget wherever you come into Brightspace. So if it's a generic Brightspace landing page like I'm getting, or if it's a specific college landing page, you will have a My Courses widget. And you can see they're divided up into different categories. We have the pinned category here, sort of again like that favorites section in Blackboard. And that's where you may choose to pin things in that little Rubik's Cube or waffle iron at the top in the mini nav bar. If you pin them, they're going to end up in the pinned bucket here. Other than that, they're going to be organized by term, as well as different schools are making choices to have like training stuff. Compliance courses, for example, can be accessed here. We can see Baruch training as a category. So depending on the schools, different schools are making different choices for what they want to have housed in this My Courses as a category. We can see organizations as a category. It just kind of depends on the school you're at and your association here at CUNY for what you're going to see. Continuing on, we have this notifications over here that's just asking about notifications that you're receiving. Practice sites. So wherever you come into Brightspace, you most likely will have a practice site widget on your landing page, whether that's the generic CUNY Brightspace landing page, whether it's a specific school's landing page. I will say this. There are a few schools in the CUNY system that have opted out of the practice site widget. And in those cases, if you would like a practice site, I would recommend reaching out to a campus teams contact at your school to request that they create one for you. So as I mentioned before, practice sites, or sometimes people like to call them sandboxes, is just a space that you can build a course, edit a course. It doesn't have students in it. You can't add students to it. But there is some value in having a practice site. Remember how I talked earlier today about course migration is happening now to move 4 years of courses for you over from Blackboard into Brightspace. And as that happens and you're seeing those Blackboard courses appear in Brightspace, you may decide you want to create a practice site to do your editing. You are not required to do this. If you would just rather edit what was migrated over, that is certainly an option as well. I'm kind of the mindset that I would personally like to keep my migrated course like untouched in its original state, and then make a copy of it into a practice site where I can do all my editing and moving things around and getting everything just right. Because before the semester starts, I can take that wonderful practice site where everything is all edited, and I can copy it into my shell with my students, so we'll be all set for the semester. So let's walk through the steps of creating a practice site. with the idea that if you're at a school that has this widget so that you have the ability to create one yourself, you may choose to do that to build a course in it or to course copy a migrated Blackboard course and then edit it. Both of those scenarios are perfectly legitimate, but let's go through the steps. So you would come down here to get started, and then you need to give it a name. So I would say, I recommend putting your name in it somehow, and then maybe the course that you're teaching. I'm just going to put practice site 36 because I'm pretty sure I have probably about that many that have been created so far. I do recommend being very mindful with your naming conventions for your practice sites, because once you create a practice site, you can't change the name. So while you're at this step of it, just really kind of think through in your head, is this like the name you really want to have? Because you're not going to be able to change your mind later on. So I'm going to go with the name and then practice site 36, but perhaps I'd have it like English 101 or whatever if it was a course I was teaching. I do recommend having something that's going to be easy for you to remember and perhaps easy for a campus team's contact to locate inside Brightspace at your school if they're helping you with something. And then you're going to come down here to course type, and you're going to select CUNY practice site because it is the only choice to select. And you're going to go next. And so now it's going to ask you, okay, is this right? You're going to call it this, it's this. You can either choose to go back if you're like, well, let me change that name. Let me go backwards. Maybe it's 37. So you can choose to change the name at this point. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and finish though, which would be the other step you could do is say, yep, I'm going to finish it. The other point that I want to make though, not only can you not change the name after you give it a name, you also can't delete practice sites once you create them. So once again, I just encourage you to be very mindful about how many practice sites you're making for yourself and the names that you're giving them, because those are two things that can't be changed. You can't delete, you can't change the name. So let's go ahead and finish it. So it says can't enroll students in class list. So that's kind of like what I mentioned before. This is a practice site or a sandbox. You can't put students in. You could create another practice site if you wanted, or you can go to the homepage of this practice site we just created. So let's go ahead and do that so I can show you what that looks like. So this right here is an empty practice site. I don't have any specific branding associated with a certain school because I'm not associated with one particular school, but likely you would see branding that's associated with your school. So I'm going to come in here and I see the name of my course. As I mentioned before, the Mini-navbar is consistent no matter where you are in Brightspace. But now I'm looking at some of the things that are on my navbar here. Course admin, I do encourage you to locate that on your navbar as soon as you can, because course admin is a quick and easy way to get to all of the tools that you have access to inside Brightspace. So like when I come here to course admin, we have two views. We can choose to go by name, which I kind of prefer because I feel like it's easier to find stuff if it's alphabetized. Or you can click on category, and then it just splits it up into categories that it feels it's related to. So, like under assessment, we've got assignments, which makes sense because we've got assessing learners as a workshop and we talk about assignments. So if you prefer to do it that way, you certainly can. That's an option. I usually kind of lean into the name instead. And here's where we can see all of our different tools, which we will be covering in more detail in upcoming workshops, like announcements, assignments, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get into a deep dive on many of these other things. But I would encourage you to get acquainted with where course admin is on your navbar. It is possible it might be located under something else. So if you see items on your navbar that have a little downward chevron next to them, and I know this says more, so that's very obvious, but you could have a downward chevron next to assessments, for example, and it might not occur to you, oh, there's other stuff under there. So anywhere you see a downward chevron, you can click, and that's going to show you more options that you can go to. But again, any of these tools can also be accessed through course admin. I do want to also point out that many schools, but I would be hesitant to say all, have the option for doing some editing of navbars. And I'd say I'm not sure I want to say all, because I know that each school in the CUNY system has been making some of their own decisions about setting things up and what kind of different tools the instructors have access to. So it may or may not be true at your school. But if you can move your cursor over here on the right and see this little button up here, so it's not here, and there it is, and you click on it, customize this nav bar, when you go to that, so it's going to a copy of the nav bar, it gives you the option then to come in and decide if you want to remove a link from your nav bar, which would just be like clicking out of it. If you want to come down here and add a link, you can be like, oh, I want to add attendance or whatever, just as an example. So you can add different things to your nav bar. I'm just going to cancel this so that I'm not actually saving that change. So that could be an option too. So let me show you though more inside this empty practice site of what's going on. And again, we're going to get into a lot of this stuff in our other workshops. Quick eval is sort of like needs grading in Blackboard, like an easier way to find stuff that's been turned in by your students that needs to be graded. Content is just going to be a way to look at the basic structure that you've set up inside your course. Now, this is an empty practice site, and I'm going to show you course copy in a second that is going to populate this content area with stuff. But right now it's empty. And one thing I want to point out, there is this section called Overview inside Brightspace. You cannot change the name Overview. Some people aren't too crazy about the name, but you can add an attachment, but you cannot change the name of it. So it's an area that we are kind of recommending to consider putting information that you feel your students might need to access on a semi-regular basis during the semester in your course. For example, you might want to put your syllabus in this section. That's certainly an option. But I want to show you something. If I go to Student View up here, View as Learner, if I don't want to put anything inside that overview, notice how it's not visible here. I'm pretending to be a student right now in my own little practice site. And if you don't want to use that overview section because you just don't like the name or whatever, if it just doesn't work for you, that's okay. Students will not see it if you choose to not use it. So I'm just going to come back up here and then exit out of being a learner and go back to being the instructor inside my practice site. Assignments, discussions, quizzes, grades, those are all upcoming workshops that we're going to get into. So what I want to show you is how to do course copy, because as I mentioned, we created a practice site and potentially you might decide that you want to copy one of your migrated courses that came over from Blackboard into a practice site to kind of shuffle things around. We have heard mixed reports from people that there will probably be some editing needed to get your course ready to be taught for the next semester from a course that was migrated over from Blackboard. So let's look at the steps of what that looks like. I'm going to come over here to Course Admin, and then we're going to look for this thing, Import, Export, Copy Components. And remember, if you're not seeing it, maybe it's under Category, it's going to be down under here, under Site Resources. I always go with name, I just find that easier. Import, export, copy components. So it's asking you, what would you like to do? And the top one that's already populated is copy components from another org unit, which is just fancy terminology from Brightspace for your course. And if you forget that, where it says, what is an org unit? When you click on that, it just goes, oh, org unit means course. So copy components from another org unit. Now I want to pause for a second and point out, this is the opposite of Blackboard. This is telling you, you will be inside the empty thing in Brightspace, our practice site we just created that is empty. You start off inside the empty thing, and then you reach out to the course that has the stuff you want, and you pull it over. And because we're talking about copy, we're talking about things that are already existing inside Brightspace. Remember, I say like migration is more of the term for like from one platform to another. So at any rate, I'm going to show you pretending that we've got a course that was migrated over from Blackboard and is now currently existing in Brightspace, and we're going to copy it into our shell, or excuse me, our sandbox to edit. These are the steps you're going to want to do. So course to copy, search for offering, search for the course you want. You click on the little button here, and I'm going to just put in the last name of my colleague who created a course that we can use to copy into here. It's taking an awfully long time. Okay, so I'm going to take this right here. There's a demo course that we've built that has content in it. I'm just going to click Add Selected. So now it's going to display right here what you've picked as, bring the information over from this into my practice site, into my sandbox. There are other options here: copy components from parent template, export as Brightspace package, common cartridge, a lot of other different routes to go. But in terms of course copy, you're just going to be using copy components from another org unit. Now you'll see at the bottom here, you have the option to copy all components or select components. I feel like most of the time you're going to want to go with copy all components. But if you're ever in a scenario where you're just trying to pick something specific out of another course, like you want to copy over like your quizzes and your question library, you can come down here to the bottom, select components, and then that's going to either give you the option to like check everything. If you go, never mind, I'll just take it all. Or you can just scroll through and be like, I want to copy over quizzes and my question library. And that's where you could continue on to start processing that. I'm going to go back. And it does delete what you already put in there. So I'm going to go back and search for that offering again to repopulate this. All right, so let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. This is the thing I want. Add selected. So now it's gone back to repopulating that here. I am just going to click copy all components. I'm going to bring everything over from this pretend migrated course from Blackboard into my empty practice site. And so now it tells you it is in the process of copying all the components from this demo course. And you can see it's kind of like working through it over here. Now, while it will take a few minutes to copy everything over, in the meantime, we could already take a look at adjusting the dates of everything that's coming over. So we could go review and manage dates. And that's going to bring us to this page here, where, for example, you could say adjusting dates on all if you have lots of dates set up for things, or perhaps maybe you just like to set dates on assignments and discussion boards and quizzes, perhaps, whatever makes sense to you. And you can come down here and apply that filter we set above. And now it's filtered to just have in here things that are assignments, or this little logo here that looks like two little cartoon bubbles, discussion boards. This is an assignment here. Let's see if they show like some quizzes. This rectangle with a question mark in it is just indicating that, yes, it is a quiz. Of course, this is called general knowledge quiz, so that's probably pretty obvious. So it's now just populated with our discussion boards, assignments, and quizzes, because that's what we picked. That's what we decided we want to look at. So you can do bulk edit dates down here, where you could just check this. It selects them all, bulk edit dates. I'm kind of a fan of the bulk offset dates, and I'll show you why. So you can choose to offset due dates, start dates, end dates, other activity dates, any dates you have given these things that we picked to filter, the discussions, the assignments, the quizzes. And you can choose either offset by direction and range if you happen to know how many days forward you want to push your calendar here. So like if the last time you taught it was spring semester, so January 26th or whatever was the first day of the semester, and you wanted to bump it forward to be fall semester, and you might be like, oh, okay, August 27th. So if you knew how many days that was, you could just say, I want to move it forward by whatever, 120 days, whatever. They also have hours here too, which I think is kind of interesting. And you have the option to go backwards. I'm sure there's use cases for both of those, for hours and backwards, but I don't feel like it's going to be the one people would commonly go to. And then down here, calculate range in between two dates. So this is where you could choose to come in here and just click on it. And let me make this sure this blows up here. And you could say, okay, I started January. So we're going to come in here to January. And I think I just kind of offhanded said like maybe the first day of the semester was the 29th. So we're moving it from the first day was the 29th to maybe we want to move it now to the first day of the fall semester. So if we're just kind of imagining here, it was like the 26th. And see how it says dates will be offset forward by 210 days. So then I can just click save and it will automatically bump all those dates forward. And if you're thinking like, whoa, those are way forward because we're talking 2025, we've just played around with these dates a lot doing demos. So it just keeps pushing everything forward. But at any rate, it will set it for the appropriate amount. So that's one way that you can certainly do that. So after we've kind of adjusted some of our dates, this is when you might want to come in and look at some of your work that you've already migrated stuff over. So we can come to content. And when we come to content, now we can see it's not empty, it's populated with material from this course that we copied. So here in the overview section where I said you may want to consider putting information in here that you feel your students might want to use multiple times during the semester, things you might want to put in here, course learning outcomes, some basic tips for navigating inside the course, perhaps a calendar. We've got an example of a syllabus in here that's just nice and neat and embedded in here so it's easy for your students to find it. I know perhaps it might seem a little bit nicer if like this said like syllabus over here instead of overview, but I think if you just send out an announcement to your students saying, hey, the syllabus is going to be housed inside overview on this left side vertical menu, and that's where you'll find it. Okay, additionally, we can see bookmarks here. This is another tool, sort of like notifications, where it only is going to be doing this for the person sitting at the computer right now. So you can create bookmarks for yourself, which I feel you probably wouldn't, but students might want to do that. And what it looks like for a student doing that is they would come into part of the course here. Maybe they're on the introductions, and the student says, oh, I'll come back to this later. So when they click on that little bookmark, and then they come back to this content, now we can see there is one bookmark for that student. So the student can jump right back to where they left off. So it's probably more useful for students than instructors. Course schedule. We've got the course schedule here. It's probably going to be a little bit kind of funny with the dates being pushed out as far as they are, but so it's not necessarily showing stuff now, but if we went farther ahead, we would see some dates. Continuing on, one thing I want to point out on this left side vertical menu, there is table of contents at the top, and then below we see our modules. Maybe you don't like the word modules. If you prefer lessons or units, that's fine too. These are labeled as week, but let me show you the difference. When you're inside content and you go to table of contents on your left side vertical menu, that is going to give you the opportunity to look at all of your modules at once on this right-hand side of the screen, as well as everything that is inside each module. You can just keep scrolling and scrolling. Just continues right on to week 2 and shows you everything you've got inside your week 2 module and continues onward to week 3 and so on and so forth. If you want to drill down specifically into just one module, you would just click specifically on that module. And now we're just seeing on the right-hand side, just that module. Now I'm keeping my eye on the time because I do want to save some time at the end for questions. As I mentioned earlier, bear in mind that this workshop is just intended to be a high-level overview, and we'll be drilling down deeper into building things, making assignments, making discussion boards, quizzes in upcoming workshops. So this is just a very kind of generic, kind of big picture of looking at things. Before I open up the floor to questions, though, I do want to point out some quick things that will help you when you start building your course. When you've done this course copy, and maybe perhaps you want to start doing some editing. If you want to add any modules, you come to the left side vertical menu inside content, and where you see it says add a module, you can just click that, and then we could put week 6, for example. And as soon as you click outside of that box, it's going to spring into life. And we can see week 6 is now here. Now, ways you can do editing and changing stuff inside Brightspace, 2 important things for you to know now, but bear in mind our next workshop, ABCs of Content, is going to get way more into the nitty-gritty of building your course. I just kind of want to put it out there right now. Brightspace is very big on like a very clean aesthetic, so it's not always like overly obvious where you can go to do editing. So I want to point out some things. First of all, whenever you see one of these downward chevrons, that's absolutely a sign that something else can take place here. So we can click on this downward chevron. We could change the title. We could hide it from people, move up, move to, all this stuff, delete module even. So there's lots of options. Whenever you see a chevron, that's telling you there's more here. Now, the other one that's not as obvious, so I'm definitely taking the time to point this out, it's kind of an invisible button. And again, it's sort of the purpose of just having things look nice and clean. Look at my cursor right now on the screen. You can see it's a little arrow. But when I move over here, it changes to a little clicky hand, a little pointy hand. And you can even notice a subtle color change from being white around the words add dates and restrictions to this light blue color. That is indicating it is a button you can click on. So when I click on that, it now gives me the option to add a start date here if we only wanted this module to appear to students on a certain day and time. A due date, I'm not really sure you'd use due dates for modules, but when we get into assignments and quizzes and stuff, that makes more sense. End date, this is when something disappears. I've certainly seen instructors use start and end dates for kind of like controlling the pace that the student might move through their course. So that's an option. Release conditions, we're going to get into this much more in ABCs of Content and even like assessing learning and creating discussion boards. That just means, do you want your students to have to do something before they can access this part of the course? So it could be coming down here to content. It could be visiting all content topics. And you could say that they have to visit everything else before they come here. Or perhaps you might say whatever the last thing was in your week 5. I don't remember if it was a discussion board or something, but I'll just come here to discussions. You could say they have to do the last thing in your week 5, perhaps. Let's see, posts authored in topic. And then it'll give us our choices of discussion boards. So we might come down here and say, oh, Star Trek is our week 5 discussion board. So we could choose that they're not going to see module 6 until they do the last thing in module 5. That is certainly an option that you can create. And then it shows you students have to do this before they're going to see week 6. But I'm just going to get rid of that for now. Another example of an invisible button right here where it says add a description. So once again, notice how my cursor goes from being an arrow to I move it down here and it changes colors and becomes a little hand. You can click on this and it's going to make a box that you can populate. You might put information in here about week 6. Week 6 is going to be talking about blah, blah, blah. Here's what you have to do this week. You can certainly type in here. We have some different tools up here in the text box that you will see anytime you see a text box in Brightspace. There is the Insert Stuff button, which when you click on it gives you various options for ways you can insert things into this text box, so that we'll go into in more detail in upcoming workshops. We've got Add a Course Link, so you can have them connect to something else. Maybe at the beginning of week 6, you might want to say, make sure you do such and so assignment. So you might want to come in and say, do, let's see, we'll say reflection essay or something like that. And you could just type before it, please do. So that would be a way to put a link into your course. that the students can link on or click on, and it'll just take them straight to that part of your course. That's an option that you can do. Another thing is, of course, you can add images. That's an option as well that can come from your computer or course offering files, which is just a fancy way of saying the internal filing system inside your course inside Brightspace. So there's various ways that you can populate this. You can see down here it says update or cancel. So I'm just going to cancel that. And I want to show you one last thing before I take a break for questions, which is let's see how the landing page of this practice site looks now that we've brought stuff over. It was empty at first. There wasn't anything to see. Now, if I go up to the top and I click on the name of the course, that takes me back to the landing page of my course. And now here we can see these little tiles in the visual table of contents that show the students the various modules that are currently existing in our course. You can click on any of those to go straight to that module. And I do want to point out that that section I showed you of add a description, if I click on this little I here, it flips it over. This information, and for that matter, any picture you choose to put up there, like for example, this one, I'll show you where that's located. So we see a picture, we see this information here talking about week 2. When I click on this, it takes me into the beginning of the module for week 2. And this information here is what showed on that little tile when we flipped it over. So inside this description, and look, we can just kind of pop it open. Anything you add in this area, the description is going to be shown on that little tile when you flip it, including the pictures will appear there as well. So that's a lot of stuff to cover today. I'm sure it was probably a little bit overwhelming. I want to stop at this point and ask my colleague, Anastasia, were there any questions in the chat that I could address? Looks like I'm just getting some thank yous. Okay, well, great. So maybe people don't have questions and that's fine. So please remember that I showed at the very beginning where you can go to see the upcoming workshops here at the LMS transition. Come right down here to workshops. Please feel free to tune in to more workshops. There's plenty more coming up. And as I mentioned, there's even some evening ones. And we've got these Ask Me Anythings that kind of appear from time to time too. And also don't forget that at your school, you have people that can help you too. When you come here to look at campus teams contacts, there's a whole slew of people at your school that can help you as well. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today, and good luck. Keep up the great work with Learning Brightspace, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.